The research I'm doing, I guess, is on this reciprocal link between group exercise and social bonding. So social bonding is just so people who have social bonds generally say that they like each other more and they're more prone to cooperate with one another. And it's basically like a way of uh, talking about friendship in a way, right? Um, so on the one hand, it's like group exercise can facilitate social bonding, and on the other hand, exercising in a group that you're socially bonded to seems to facilitate exercise, or at least that's sort of what some studies would suggest and what we like hypothesize, and sort of what that paper like I showed you, which is hopefully going to get published, shows. So like the one they're both pretty interesting. So like the group exercise to social bonding is thought to be facilitated by sort of like the social highs that can come out of group exercise, and that results from the release of things like endorphins and endocannabinoids, which are sort of like your body's natural opium and marijuana. So those two drugs actually bind to the same receptors that endorphins and endocannabinoids bind to, and they have obviously similar effects. So they give you that like those positive feelings, those feelings of euphoria, and they also like reduce pain. So it's thought that like these systems evolved to like facilitate exercise in species that needed to exercise for like hunting and stuff like that. But then other people have hypothesized that it actually that feeling these emotions together like facilitates bonding, because these endocannabinoids and endorphins are also involved in like mammalian bonding. They haven't been proven to be involved in like human bonding, but that's sort of what we're sort of like the ideas that we're working with. And then the social bonding to like group exercise stuff. Well, I mean, I can imagine you sort of like experienced this like social high that you get like through exercise. I certainly have myself,
Yeah,
and
I just like I was just thinking. I just want to throw this up before I forget. Like, I'm just curious, like how like the group exercise, like how it has to do with like sex, because like just like having sex with somebody is like can be like a exercise, and like those
yeah,
maybe same things can be going off and
yeah.
enhance
There's
that
actually like
experience
lots of
too.
stuff on touch as well. So just like touching one another releases endorphins as well, and like that's how it's thought that like primates bond, or some people think that that's how primates bond, is through grooming one another, which sort of like is actually like a massage or something like that, and that releases these endorphins which calm the animals and allow them to like build these like relationships together, right?
Hmm.
And it could be like through like maybe like nobody really knows exactly how it works. It could be through the rewarding properties, or it could be that we just like come to attribute these emotions to the people that we're experiencing them with. Um, it's not really something I'm like an expert on. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think anybody really knows how it works in humans, but yeah, it's definitely you almost have to think that like anything that releases these things would be conducive to bonding. Like even like going out and like boozing together or whatever, like
Hmm.
all these, or eating things like this, right? Things that are rewarding, maybe not necessarily the exact same like neurotransmitters or whatever, but yeah, like it seems to be something that like when people get together to build bonds, they're usually doing things that make them feel good.
Yeah, I want. Yeah, even like just watching people walk across campus. Like that little
Yeah,
like 10 minutes together, even of like things. I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah, that's
People
crazy.
think laughing, like another hypothesis is that, well, like laughing is thought to release endorphins, and that might be like a way in which humans bond is through laughing together, um, which is kind of a cool idea. But like I've actually kind of got off like that direction of research and started going towards this idea that if you exercise with people who you're socially bonded to, it can actually facilitate exercise. And that sort of has like an evolutionary explanation too, because if you think like, okay, so natural selection, like all else being equal, is going to favor those organisms that like respond optimally to their environment, right? It's pretty intuitive. So this means that like organisms should take cues from their environment, and that these cues are going to affect like not only their behavior but also just like how their body governs their like how they govern their bodily resources, if that makes sense. So like one of my favorite studies that sort of demonstrates this is that like animals seem to animals seem to recover quicker from like infections and stuff in the summertime compared to the wintertime. So like people have shown this experimentally by like manipulating like what type of year animals think it is, and then injecting it with like bacteria or something, right? And like the idea is that so if you get infected in the wintertime, like you have a given amount of immune resources to like throw at the infection to fight it off, right?
Right.
But you also need to like replenish these resources so that you're not like vulnerable to future infection or something, right? So in the wintertime, if you threw all your resources at a given infection, you might get rid of it, but then you'll have like your immune resources will be depleted, and you'll have like less of a chance to fight off the next infection. So you should be conservative, always maintaining like a reserve of immune resources. Whereas in the summertime, you can throw all your immune resources at the infection because throughout the evolutionary paths of like all species, basically, the summertime has been correlated with higher levels of like resources in the environment. So it makes sense that there's some mechanism that basically takes these cues from the environment and says, like, at a subconscious level, obviously, okay, we can use more resources now that it's summertime, right? So we can fight off this infection more quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I couldn't get my mic on. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can like that's been shown in like hamsters and stuff like that. That's like the study I was talking about. But you would think that in like species that are super social, like obviously humans are like hypersocial. Some people call it. So much of our lives and survival and reproduction is dependent on our social relationships. That like maybe like summertime and wintertime, that like there are like social relationships that are sort of like social summertime or like social wintertime, right? So like maybe being ostracized from the group is like social wintertime because you're like you're more at danger, you're more vulnerable, you're less likely to have access to resources and stuff like that. Whereas on the other hand, if you're in like a cohesive, supportive environment, like the opposite is probably true.
Right.
So like there's been some cool studies, like I've been telling you, like how if I held your hand and you're in pain, you would probably feel less pain. At least that's what these experiments show. Which is like super interesting to think about, just from like this whole idea of like visiting someone in the hospital or like visiting someone when they feel sick. You know, like how what can that actually, how can that actually like change the way their body is like using resources and change the way they're feeling like pain and things like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, like those sort of ideas would suggest that like, well, it's like a big part of exercise is pain, obviously. So potentially if you're in like a supportive environment, like the painful cue that you get from exercise might be less important, because like pain is essentially telling you, hey, like relax or get away from that stimulus that is causing pain, right? So but when you're in a safe, supportive environment that you associate with like these people that you're exercising with, it might be that pain becomes like less necessary because it's actually your body's assuming that you're not actually in such a dangerous situation, so it doesn't need to warn you so much with pain to like stop doing what you're doing. It's sort of the idea. And then yeah, like that gets into like this whole like idea of how our body governs fatigue and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I was also saying is like largely dependent on context and stuff like that. So fatigue is like a mental, cognitive like emotion more than like a thing that results from your muscles like stopping working because they're lacking whatever thing they need to work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's what we're looking at, is like what are the sort of social environments that can facilitate exercise for just everybody, basically.